Real quick, before we get started, I want to give a shout out to the sponsor of this podcast, Greenlight.ai. We all know how important compliance is, and Greenlight.ai is the leader for compliance and EOR services, especially for talent platforms. You're going to hear about them later, but thank you to Greenlight.
Hi, I'm Tony Buffum, Head of Enterprise Strategy with Human Cloud, and here doing the recently launched Human Cloud HR podcast. In this podcast, we love to talk about the intersection of technology and talent and how different technologies are enabling people within organizations, and namely the HR function, to drive a critical transformational change for their organizations for the betterment of everyone involved. A lot of times these technologies kind of fly under the radar. So I love the opportunity to help amplify and introduce you, the listener, to something I think can drive a lot of value in an easy way, hitting that easy button and make everyone's life better. So today I'm here with Deborah Hanus, who's the CEO of Sparrow. And we just met before SHRM Annual recently, a couple months ago. But I actually saw her over a year ago at SHRM Annual presenting on one of the stages and talking about what Sparrow did, and it really, really motivated me to get to know her better. So I don't want to take any thunder away from what Deborah's going to describe about her organization. I want to give you, Deborah, a chance to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself and, of course, about Sparrow, and we'll take it from there.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tony. I appreciate the kind words, and I appreciate you having me on the podcast today. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Sparrow, which makes it simple for companies to provide their employees with leave. We started about 7 years ago. I was in a PhD program at Harvard in AI, and I was halfway through that program when there was this 1 6-month period where 6 of my friends went out on some kind of leave. Parental leave, medical leave, caregiving leave, everyone struggled with the paperwork, the process, the timing, figuring out just the basics of how they were going to get paid. They all spent a lot of extra hours with their HR teams, which led me to start wondering how HR is managing this. And what I found is that leave is an even bigger pain point for HR than it is for the employee. Like, it's in the last 10 or 15 years, there's been all this interest in federal paid leave, but so far there's been a lot of compliance passed at the federal level, but all the paid programs are getting passed at the state level, the city level, the county level. So for HR teams, as their teams are becoming more and more distributed, it's sort of just become absolutely impossible to stay on top of all of the compliance. And what was striking to me was just how much of it is really a data problem. You're making sure that everyone has the right information at the right time. So that was Sparrow's approach to this, is we said, what if we just start there and make sure everyone has the information they need when they need it. Everyone's looking at the same dates. All of the notifications are delivered cleanly in one dashboard. Behind the scenes, all of the paperwork gets filed actually for the employee in HR. Just really making a really complicated process something that is simple, seamless, and stress-free.
Yeah, well, and that stress-free part is critically important, because it's not even just for the employee or the person going through the leave. But as you mentioned, it's a complicated process, or it can seem that way for HR, and that burden and all that complication really trickles out through the rest of the organization. And we've seen what kind of impact that can have on organizations. McKinsey and others report that burnout and caregiving needs for their employee populations are top drivers of attrition. And sometimes it's not something as specific as, well, what are we doing with leave? Could that be a part of the? No, usually the symptoms manifest themselves in terms of things like attrition or disengagement numbers, whatever it might be. And companies that figure out how to improve their resources around this can really unlock retention, unlock improvement for their employer brand. So where I think that question gets us is for HR leaders thinking about something that's a little bit more specific, like leave management. How can they reframe that as part of their broader workforce ecosystem strategy for solving those other issues, burnout, attrition within their employee population?
Absolutely. That's an incredible question, Tony. I think that there is this sort of misconception often in HR that, they leave only 6 to 10% of your workforce is going, I would say in some types of workforce is 6 to 20% of your workforce is going out on leave every single year. So I think sometimes HR executives might think it's not that big of a problem, something like benefits or HRIS or onboarding, that's affecting everyone. So it feels like in some ways a smaller problem, but I would say that's what we find the most sort of forward thinking, and I would say like really thoughtful and strategic leaders are saying and seeing is that it's really, these are moments where even though it might only happen to 10% of your workforce in any given year, but these are really big moments in an employee's professional journey and their personal journey. And not only is there a lot of compliance that HR needs to manage around that, but really the way HR manages that experience and imagines that moment in the employee journey can have such a huge impact in how the employee sees themselves within the organization. And it really is, I think, if employers are able to really show up for their team in these moments, like it is such a huge driver for long-term success. The people that really they feel like they've been taken care of, like their employer has really seen them, not just as another worker, but, seen them in their whole journey and really taking care of them in this moment. And if companies can actually really master that, then it does so much to build employee trust and retention. But I think often what happens is because there are so many moving pieces throughout a leave that often the information is not all in one place. There are just so many little moments that make it very easy to lose employee trust. Things like even if it's not HR, maybe the employee makes a mistake when they're filing paperwork with an insurance company or a state agency, and then their pay ends up coming late. They can often feel like, well, why am I needing to go through this process? Why hasn't HR helped me with this? And it creates these moments where even though HR did their best to show up the best they could, they still ended up leaving feeling like they weren't supported in the moments they need it most. Say that's an example of a little thing that can happen. Another example is even just often leave dates change, and there could just be a mistake, and maybe the employee noted that their leave date changed, HR knew it, but maybe their manager didn't get the message that the employee's leave date changed. And when you're coming back from a major life event, whether it be a surgery, coming back from a parental leave, you're already a little bit nervous. Like, what's changed? If you're at a fast-growing organization, probably a lot of things have changed. It's possible half your team has changed. You might be new people. You might be working with new people cross-functionally. And you really want to go back to how things were, but also you're managing you're in a transitionary period as you're coming back from this other major life event. And if people don't know that you're coming back, you might not have a desk to sit at. You might not have the right onboarding materials to really make sure that you're being set up for success, which can really have a huge, huge impact on retention. And I do actually brings me to another point, which is at Sparrow, we always encourage our customers to think of the leave re-onboarding process as in some ways similar to new hire onboarding. Thinking, we spend all of this time investing in making sure that our new hires know about the company's goals, metrics that are going to be important to their role, making sure that they know all of the right people to be able to be set up for success. But often when someone comes back from a leave, we just say they were so good at their job 3 months ago. They'll be fine, and forget that actually the team has changed, goals have changed, and really they still need all of that same information and support in order to be successful.
Yeah, I feel like if you're an HR person to listen to this, I hope anybody listening to this understands that it can't be overstated how much impact you can have when this is done right, in terms of someone really feeling taken care of at a challenging time, getting that kind of re-onboarding as you just described, getting that right and helping them integrate back into the team, into the organization, their job, while at the same time, recognizing they're still integrating part of their life, whether it's, a new family member or an old family member, or like you said, a surgery, whatever it might be, they're still in this kind of recovery mode, and they're still adapting to that, and they're readapting to work. And any drop ball can make that even more complicated, even more difficult. So imagine this kind of white glove service. Certainly, I think a lot of people listening will go, wow, imagine the loyalty that we can inspire when done right. But I would imagine at the same time, they might be thinking, but that sounds like a lot of work. How does Sparrow turn that sense of, that would be great to do, but it seems really complicated, a lot of details, how do you enable them to press that easy button? What does it look like after they press that?
Absolutely. I'd say that we do. I guess I'll start with the first part of your question, which is how we do it. And I'd say that a lot of the way Sparrow is approaching this problem is, the default is today, the way leave is usually managed is there is someone on Google coordinating with employment lawyers, coordinating with payroll, really trying to bring all of this information all together in order to try to set the employee up for success. But they're not really set up for success in order to set the employee up for success. I think that there's been certainly most companies, it's been a funny economy for the last couple of years. And I think that most companies are thinking, and most HR teams are thinking about how they can do more with less and how they can be even more effective. And the way Sparrow's approaching this problem is there are part of the reason the default is there is someone on the HR team managing this, coordinating with a lot of different sources, is because all of that coordination is hard. The data is not in the right place. And I think people have believed that it's so hard, a person needs to do it. Whereas I often say, when I'm describing what Sparrow does, I often say in some ways we're like the original AI, in that we're taking something that is so hard that no one believes technology can do it. And we're automating and using technology to make more efficient the things that should be automated, making sure no one is copy pasting things, digging into areas that don't make sense. But at the same time, figuring out, being able to differentiate the parts of the process that should not be automated and should always be handled by a human, because these are really, like we said, they're very sensitive moments in the employee's professional journey. When you have, I think often people think of things like parental leave, which are usually mostly happy events. They're stressful, but mostly happy. But there are also much more stressful events. Maybe you had a premature newborn and they're in the NICU and you're afraid that you're going to spend your entire leave sitting in the NICU and you won't have any time to bond with them. Maybe you're caring for an aging parent, and often after years of working with them on that, most of those do end in some kind of bereavement leave. Spouse was in a car accident and, now they're in the hospital. Like, these are all very difficult moments. And you don't necessarily want to be talking to a chatbot when that happens. You really want to understand, we understand that you don't want a library to do your own research either. You want someone to say, okay, I understand everything that's complicated about your situation, and these are the next steps. These are the parts we can do for you. Here's why you need to do them. And here's, we've taken care of the rest. That's really what you want. You don't want to think about it. And I would say that that's the approach that Sparrow has taken to this whole process, is just making sure that we're creating an experience that really acknowledges how complicated everything is and makes it so that HR teams can know that if they're using Sparrow, they can know that this whole process is managed for the employee end to end. They have the high touch support that they would wish to be able to provide. They have the information they need. And often it actually provides a lot of operational efficiency for the team as well, because you don't have someone on your team trying to gather all of this data over 6 to 10 different sources. You actually just have one piece of technology that you can log into. We integrate with HRIS systems, payroll systems. So really everything leave related can be in one place for your entire team globally.
Yeah, I think that answer immediately brought me back in time to like a young HR professional trying to manage these kind of situations. There, to your point, there's a lot of data coming from different points, and you're trying to communicate with hiring managers, and you're trying to communicate with corporate maybe, and the employee themselves. And the time that you dedicate to that particular situation, when so much of it's absorbed with just juggling all those balls, you risk, we would talk about rubber balls and glass balls. The glass ball is the empathy for the employee. You drop that one and you really break something that's hard to get back. But if you drop one of the other balls, then it bounces back. It's just, in that situation, a lot of these are actually made out of glass. So when you can take all these other balls out of someone's hands, and all you have to do is hold the one that's glass, you enable that HR person to be the person they want to be the HR, the support, the empathy, the caring that you want to represent the organization in the way they want to do it, rather than feeling like they're also giving not as much as they could to this situation, and therefore feeling even worse for themselves, much less the employee that's going through the experience. So I think it's great that you're leveraging technology. This is the way that we want technology to augment our work experience, right? Take away all the noise and allow us to work on our value-added contribution. But people listening might also think, well, that all sounds well and good, because you get the benefit, the experience for the employees so much better. Okay, now you've made it easy for HR, but really everyone involved to manage this process. This is probably really expensive. What's the ROI story for organizations that they might not realize this unlocks while also providing these other benefits?
Hey everyone, real quick, I want to talk about the risk that is involved with an independent workforce. No matter where you are, whether it's the US, whether it's Brazil, whether it's the EU, whether it's London, there is risk in how you classify and how you work with individuals. Unfortunately, it's not as easy as just paying someone. The classification, the actual collaboration, the contracts, the payments, everything is intertwined and must be connected in a way that doesn't get you in trouble with the tax authorities, regulatory authorities, and even potentially class action lawsuits. There are numerous examples of this. Just search classification lawsuit and you'll get plenty. Which is why today's sponsor, Greenlight.ai, is the modern EOR, modern compliance solution for the modern workforce. There's 4 things that we want to call out when hiring an independent worker that you need. And that is, you need to onboard, you need to classify, you need to send payments, and you need to manage this global workforce. It's more than just one person, and Greenlight has all of that covered. All right, I want you to head over to greenlight.ai and tell them Human Cloud sent you.
I agree with you that I think that is often something that people's first response is, we don't have room for our budget for another benefit. I actually don't think of Sparrow as a benefit, although I think we do have this very happy circumstance, I would say, for our users. HR sees it as a tool for them, something to make them more effective, something to make their day easier. The employee does see it as a benefit for them because, only a company that cares would invest in a solution like this, I think, is often the way they lead the experience. But when I think of Sparrow, when I'm explaining what it does to a CHRO or a chief people officer, I'd say really it is, we are saving teams time, headcount. Often it takes 10 to 20 hours to manage a leave. If you think it is taking you less, it's usually because a few different people are managing aspects of the process. Like maybe if you're not managing all of the payroll, it might only take you 10 hours and it might be taking payroll another 10 hours. So already, if you're, even for a relatively small company, that adds up to thousands of hours per year very quickly. And they're not fun hours either. They're really stressful hours where you're like, that you're making mistakes and you're going to get the company sued. They're not the hours that you wish you were spending. And then I would say one of the biggest things is actually because we're actually, usually what happens is I would say all of this paperwork is roughly taxes complicated to file. If you can imagine like needing to file your taxes without TurboTax, without an accountant.
No, I don't ever want to imagine that.
I don't really want to imagine it either. But the tax code is all public, you can do it. You can download it and you can get a 1090 and you can go fill it out. But probably you'll make mistakes. You'll be like, which number goes in which box? I'm not really sure. Just guess. If you're under stress, like, you have a major life event going on at home, if it's very time sensitive, the way leave paperwork is, it's even more likely that you'll make mistakes. And so what happens, I would say, in more than half of the cases where people are trying to manage this, is the employee does make mistakes. They usually end up not getting all of the benefits that they're eligible for, either from the state insurance or from the private disability insurance provider. And then ultimately that ends up being another moment for them to feel unsupported with their employer. And usually HR teams end up sort of scrambling to try to, if the employee complains, they sort of scramble to try to put something together and end up paying that amount to the employee anyway, because they can't figure out how to make the state agency or their insurance company do what they want. So most of the companies that we're working with actually see a 4 to 10x financial ROI just in the salary cost savings. The money that they would have had to have paid to the employee anyway while they were out on leave, instead they're able to get more of that, sort of like with TurboTax maximizing benefit amounts. They're actually able to get those payments from the state if they have some sort of state paid leave or their short-term disability, in order to make sure that the right thing is actually happening. The employee feels supported the whole time. And I think it's easy to think of that as a sort of intangible, but just the other day I was talking to someone who shared that they had gone out on leave, caregiving leave, to care for their aging father in his last months. And there had actually been fraud on their state account. So they fortunately they were using Sparrow, but they tried to manage the filing. They had been told you're not eligible because there's been fraud on your account, and we think this might be fraud too. And because they were using Sparrow, we were able to, that this is a situation where a human steps in. And we were able to help them resolve what had happened and get everything worked out, file an appeal. And they were ultimately able to get paid for those 12 weeks that they were out. But without that, she said, I wouldn't have had the bandwidth to handle this. Like, this was such an emotional event. Like, I would have just used my savings for those 3 months. And it was really, I think, at least for me, it was really a moment where it was great to hear the impact that we're able to have for people, and that we're able to both provide a really strong financial ROI for the companies that are using us. I mean, a number of our customers are saving, spending $250,000 with Sparrow and then saving $2.5 million at the end of the year. So there's that really strong, clear financial ROI just in salary costs, not time saved, not efficiency, not lack of lawsuits due to compliance. Next, just in the salary cost savings. But in addition to that, we are also able to really have a huge financial impact and experience impact for the employees of our customers as well.
Yeah, I think, the more I understood that, just the savings in the salary costs should hopefully satisfy the finance and accounting folks listening to the call or listening to the podcast, and also should make HR folks or other organizational leaders that are listening think, so this isn't something that we're just layering on top, and it's this other big investment that you're returning salary costs back to the company that they probably would have spent or overspent because of the mismanaged and kind of complex process. And I like your point. Like, that's great. That satisfies that, making that ROI argument so you can get the software in the door and get the team in it. But the real impact is on the front line with the employees, with them being able to navigate a situation like that can feel, without a company like Sparrow, completely desperate and lost. At a time where you don't have any employee, any person just likely doesn't have the wherewithal to take on this highly administrative complexity. It's a lot easier to just power through so you can focus on the rest of your life. So it's amazing, that kind of impact. I love this story. I'm sure people listening want to hear more about what Sparrow does and how they can partner with Sparrow. Deborah, what's the best way for them to learn more or to contact Sparrow?
Absolutely. Probably the best way is to go to our website. We share a lot of resources there. The website is trysparrow.com, TRYSPARROW, like the bird. We have a number of resources there. You can also sign up for a demo. And if you want to learn more about what people at Sparrow are up to, you can also follow our hashtag on LinkedIn, which is FlyWithSparrow.
Nice. So trysparrow.com and hashtag FlyWithSparrow. Great way to learn more about these opportunities for your employees, your organization, and have a big impact. I want to thank everybody that listened to this podcast. I truly believe, the reason I love talking to folks like Deborah is I truly believe this is an easy button that can have a big impact on your organization, your employees, and being the champion to bring that to the table and deliver that impact is tremendous. So if you're out there thinking that this might be a good opportunity, I encourage you to dig deep, follow go to that website, follow the hashtag, learn more, and get it done. The sooner you do, the sooner you lift the spirits of your employees, and you probably also open up some dollars for your company. Thanks again for listening to Human Cloud Podcast HR with me, Tony Buffum, and my guest, Deborah Hanus. Come listen to us again.